Okay, so thank you so much everyone for joining. Really appreciate your time this morning. This is Masterclass number 2, so we're super excited to be talking today about a business case or building the business case for EX investment, which I know for many of you, or at least those that I've spoken to over the last few months, when budgets are tight, asking for EX investment is even harder. So I really hope today's session is useful and will provide you with some practical tips and guidance on building a business case that will stand up to the rigor of your internal process. So let me just jump ahead to today's agenda. So a quick reminder, I am recording today's session. We will be posting it on our YouTube channel afterwards, similar to the last masterclass, which you'll be able to find on our YouTube channel if you want to watch that. So yeah, just a PSA there. We're going to start with a bit of an introduction. So I want to introduce Jalen to you and do a bit of an introduction of workflow. Again, just a quick recap, and then we're going to jump into building the business case. So starting first with the context, why do we need investment and why should we write a business case? So really trying to understand those fundamentals. And then looking at who should be involved in developing a business case, the measures and metrics you should be including, and then how do you present your business case and overcome resistance. We'll also finish off with a bit of an example. So we've pulled together an example of a business case for a wellness application for employees working in a remote working environment, just to kind of show you how we would go about the thinking behind developing that business case. And then we'll jump into a bit of a Q&A. So please feel free to use the chat, drop any questions that you have in the Q&A box, and we will make sure we cover those at the end of today's session, which is 45 minutes long. Okay. So a quick intro to us, Workflow. We are an employee experience design agency headquartered here in Singapore. Myself and Jalen are based here in Singapore, and Romani is part of our team, but currently based in Indonesia, which is a fantastic dynamic for us. And Jalen, do you want to take yourself off mute and just introduce yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. And once again, thanks for joining us today. So I'm Jaylin, and I'm the Senior EX Consultant here at Workflow. And I think for me, having been in like different HR functions and various industries, I think one very transferable thing would be the emphasis on employee experience, because I think it's also the emotional aspect that really creates a lasting memory with your people.
Fantastic. Thank you. So, just a quick summary of what we do. So EX business case, we've kind of put this one at the top of our little miniature post-it note on the right-hand side, but we do work with a lot of organizations to develop their business case typically for technology investments, but also for larger programs of transformation as well as a bunch of other fun things we do around employee experience design, strategy and vision, persona creation, journey mapping, the list goes on. So we're super excited about it because we think employee experience design is so critical, especially as we're moving more towards a hybrid working environment. It's so vital that we're putting employees at the heart of the enterprise experience and really considering those design elements. And when we talk about design, just to really break it down into its two components, when we look at employee experience, which is the sum of experiences your employees encounter as part of the organization, we like to combine that with human-centered design thinking. So if we know that EX is really key, how do we take a creative approach to problem solving that starts with people and ends with innovative solutions? So everything we do combines our passion for both of these. And yeah, you'll see that throughout the business case discussion today. So let's start first with a bit of a poll. And I'm going to launch the poll now. And the question is, are you hoping to secure some investment of any kind this year? So I'll give everybody a minute or so to respond to this one. And I can see some of the attendees might be business side. So if your clients are looking for investment, you can vote on their behalf here as well. Okay. Fantastic, I can see those votes coming in. A couple more seconds. Okay, great. So it looks like everyone's going to be looking for EX investment. So a resounding yes from everybody that voted, which is fantastic. Super exciting. So yes, I hope today is useful. So let's jump in. Investment, why does it matter? So first of all, it's it's really important for us to understand what we mean by investment. And I think when we ask the business for something, or we're asking for some kind of finance investment or resource investment, we want to understand why that's important. So first of all, investment will help you get the resources you need to deliver results. So resources in this context, we're talking about people. So the manpower that you need to get behind a project and to deliver the results that you're hoping to achieve. It will also allow you to get the budget you need to drive change. So most often when we talk to a lot of our clients, there is a budget element because there will be some kind of investment, whether that's consulting services or technology. So really thinking about that investment and that case for investment will help you get that budget. And it will also get the commitment and time you need from senior stakeholders. So I think this is often overlooked, but if you can formulate a really solid business case for investment, you're going to get a much higher buy-in from your senior stakeholders. Okay, so moving on. It isn't always money. So again, just kind of want to reiterate that it doesn't have to be money. You know, if really what is going to drive the most change or add the most value to your program of work is getting someone behind your idea, so getting someone with enough reach and enough gravitas within your organization to really drive forward a program of change, that is fantastic. And that is still worthy of a business case as well. So it doesn't always have to be money. And as we all know, if we're working in the HR sphere, we typically get the dregs of the budget anyway, or we really struggle to get the budget. So credit to HR means here on the right-hand side. So what are the different types of investment that we talk about? So resource is really key. You need people to deliver on your project. So being really clear on the kind of resource and the number of resources you need is pretty important. The second is capital. So what is the money that you need? What do you need to be able to purchase software or consulting services or whatever else it is that you need? Again, being really clear on what that investment looks like, both in the short term and in the long term, if, for example, you're looking at subscription-based software, and the list goes on. Time, so people need to invest time. So whether that's your steering committee, whether that's your resource itself or a cross-functional project team, you need to be very clear on the time that you're expecting from people. And then the last is endorsement. So who do you need at that senior level to endorse your work, and be really, really clear on what does that stakeholder map look like? Who is going to drive the most value for you? And a key element here is being really clear on the ask. So hopefully over the next few slides, we'll share some hints and tips and a bit of a structure into how to do that. But again, it's being really, really clear on these four elements. What is it that you really need? What are you asking for? There is nothing more frustrating than when you hear someone pitch an idea or pitch a project and they're not clear on the ask. So I think getting all of these four written down, maybe take some notes if you're watching this, is really, really key. Okay, but let's take it back to basics quickly. What is an EX business case? What is a business case? Why do we need to develop this? You know, you hear a lot about people developing business cases when they're launching a business, but you know, very rarely internally. Put simply, it is your pitch deck. It is the document that you use to summarize your problem, the solution you're putting forward, and your required investment. It's a document that can be used to procure resources and to shape your EX design principles going forward. So I like to look at it as like a foundational reference guide. When the project kicks off, we keep referring back to what the business case was, and it keeps people aligned on what are we trying to achieve, what problem are we trying to solve, and what are we asking for? And I think if you can articulate all of those things in one document that's very concise, you know, we're not looking for a thesis here, it's a very, very concise pitch deck. It's going to really help you have consistent and meaningful conversations with the stakeholders you need to get support from. So what should you include? So at a very high level, here is kind of a four-part structure. So first of all, what is the problem? So what employee experience challenge are you trying to solve? And this should include a very clearly defined and researched problem that you're trying to solve, backed up with data, ideally, and examples. So for example, if you are looking for investment in the onboarding experience, what data, what references do you have that support that there is a need in that area for us to invest in the experience? So really clearly define that problem statement to begin with. That has to be the anchor for your presentation and pitch deck. Then what is the cost? So not the cost of the investment, but what is the ROI you're expecting from making this investment? What are you looking to see as the benefit or the ROI on whatever it is you are spending or time-wise, whatever you're investing? And then what is the opportunity cost? So this is another really key element that I think is often missed, is if we don't do this, what is the cost to the organization? So what is the benefit cost for the organization, and what is the cost if we don't do it? And typically that's a much smaller section of the business case, but I think it's a really powerful way of communicating the message that if we sleep on this or we ignore this, this is the cost to our business. So I think that's really, really powerful. Third is how we'll solve it. So this is where you're solutioning. So this is the part of your business case where you put forward a variety of solutions. And I think it's really important that you put forward a few options. So going into a business case presentation with one solution can seem quite narrow. And a lot of people will then question, what was the thought process behind deciding that this was the best solution for our problem? So putting forward a couple of ideas is a really, really important and powerful way of getting people to know what your thought process was and to see that it's a really considered solution. And then lastly is, what do we need? So you've kind of summarized, okay, here's the problem, here's why it's important, here's what we could do, and here's our recommended course of action. Now this is what we need from you. And this is kind of getting towards, if you imagine an hour-long presentation, this would probably be around the half an hour, 40-minute mark. You've wrapped up everything, and now you're asking for the commitment, the resource, whatever it is that you need, and being super, super clear on what it is that you're asking for. So we'll come on to talk a little bit more about that further along. Okay, and why should we have one? So just a real quick recap here. What are the benefits of having a business case? So it helps align your stakeholders on the problem statements. It gets everybody in agreement as to what the primary issue is with the onboarding experience, engagement, hybrid working experience, whatever it might be. It gets everybody very clear on what the primary problem statement is. It helps to clarify the ask for multiple stakeholders. It helps create clear metrics and measures of success that you can constantly refer back to. It helps to accelerate the procurement process most of the time. And it helps to shape project plans and design principles. So often what will follow a business case is, okay, let's get to work, let's get into action, let's build out a plan or a statement of work. And that will really help you kind of kick that piece of work off. And it will help you prioritize your investments. So I think it's super important, really powerful. Obviously, we wouldn't be running this masterclass if we didn't think it was valuable. I do think there are so many benefits to having something documented and something that you can evolve over time. Jalen, what are your thoughts here?
I think building on the point of like back to basics, I think by going through this process on building on a business case, what the team will do is also to reflect on the true purpose, like what is the thing that we really need. So taking, for example, team members are asking for like more snacks or food in the pantry, rather than going head on and researching the best valued supplier. Maybe we could also take a step back to think on why the request actually came about. Is there currently like a lack of supply, variety of snacks, or are employees working like longer hours and staying back in the office? So by reflecting, we may also identify like a different problem statement and then address that accordingly instead.
Yeah, fantastic. Love it. Totally agree. And we'll come on to talk about the problem framing and spending a bit of time really understanding the why very shortly. So what about the costs? So just a quick reflection, critical thinking here. Sure, we could pour loads of time into creating a business case, but what are some of the challenges? It can be quite time consuming. It is an investment of your time as a project champion or as someone asking for investment. It will take you a little bit of time to create this if you're going to do it well. They're pretty specific to your organization, so they are hard to repeat. There isn't kind of a rinse and repeat template. Of course, there is a rinse and repeat structure, but you've got to be really specific to your organization, and that might take some time. They often require multiple stakeholders to be involved in order to be effective and to get the buy-in and to make the process of presenting this much easier. And that can be really, really difficult, especially if we're all working virtually. And they can be easily disputed. So this is something that we will come on to talk about, but often in any business case that you put forward, there will always be someone that will challenge you and will challenge your thought behind why that's an important investment or where we should be investing our money. So there are some challenges. There are definitely things that you need to be aware of, but it is entirely possible. So a couple of practical tips here. When you're developing your business case or you're starting to think about your business case, do some research, bring in those industry examples. It really brings the problem and your solution to life. So include samples and success stories from those in the industry. This is really, really powerful, especially if they're your competitors. So saying our competitors did this and this is the return that they reported externally, we should be doing it, will often help with that pitch conversation. Don't make assumptions. So avoid including statements or assumptions that lack the data or can't be defended. So this is particularly important when you talk about problem statements. And this is why researching those problem statements is so important. Just avoid putting anything in there that someone could easily dispute, because then it kind of calls into question your broader business case. Be agile about this. So don't hide away for months to develop an EX business case. Don't kind of wait for this amazing moment 8 weeks after you've started building your business case to present it. Get something on paper, start with a draft and get people involved so you're developing it in an agile fashion. It will make it a lot easier for you, and it just means you're building in those different perspectives as you go, rather than presenting it and then having a million amends or a million questions. You're really anticipating any changes well in advance. And the rule of 8. So I would generally say if you're building a business case, normally if you're presenting it, it will be in a slide deck. I'd say stick to 8 slides. It doesn't have to be laborious. Put everything else in the appendix. Don't make it a super long and complex document. Like I said, it's not a thesis. You're very clearly creating a narrative of why, what we need, and how we can activate this program of work. So just be really clear, really concise, and don't make it boring. I think it's fair to say. So what do we need before the business case? And this is really key, and this is about that problem statement framing. So as you're thinking about this, really think about your problem. Are we sure that the problem you are describing is the problem that exists in reality? And we have worked with so many clients who come to us with a problem statement, and we always go back and say, where has this come from? What data is behind this assumption? What research have you done internally to validate that this problem statement that you have described is the most important and business critical EX challenge that you have? And I really think that embarking on some kind of research, it doesn't have to be months and months of research. It could be a focus group, it could be a survey, but really try to challenge your own assumptions around what the problems are. Don't just assume because a handful of people have said something that is the priority EX challenge. Get into the data, go out and listen to your employees, really research the issue. It will really help clarify the problem statement for you. And it also means that when you are defending that problem statement and the ask, you have a solid set of data that you can refer to say, we are absolutely confident this is the problem, this is the return that we can expect to see. So please don't overlook the research. Please don't make too many assumptions. It's really, really key. And you will feel so much more confident going into that business case presentation and asking for money if you know for sure that that is the research problem. So just to reiterate, a problem well stated is a problem half solved. And I really, really believe in this. And again, it is a mantra that we take to all of the clients that we work with. Let's really think about what that problem is, and it's going to make us solving it a heck of a lot easier. So who should be involved in the business case creation? So now we're going to move to talk on about stakeholders and the stakeholders you should involve in this process. So Jaylin, over to you.
Thanks, Sasha. So getting the right people in the room really makes all the difference. So let's take a look at the different people we should involve. Firstly, we have the subject matter experts. So these are people who really understand the problem and opportunity at a granular level. Taking a HRIS implementation project, for example, they could be your recruiters who will need to link their ATS. They could be your HR business partner who will be utilizing the systems for report, or even payroll who will be utilizing the employee data. Then we have our sponsors to get your endorsement and buy-in from, such as your senior executives, program managers, or influential stakeholder. And with the same example of the HRIS implementation, besides the CHRO, you may also consider your CIO as one of the sponsors as well. Then we have our employees. Would it really be an EX case if we don't involve them? So as much as we can all sit in a room within HR to brainstorm on the way forward, the best ideas could be actually from the ground as well. So having ideas from our employees being rolled out could also really boost their morale at the same time. And finally, we also have our finance and procurement. So know what to expect. And if there's a need to call for, say, proposals or call for tender, then you can be able to make a proper plan and also plan sufficient time for it. Because as we all know and have experienced before, calling for proposals and tenders do take time as well. And moving on to managing stakeholders. So after we know who to involve, bring us to our next topic of managing the stakeholders. So these are some points we'd like to highlight. So firstly, let people know what you're working on ASAP, as such as mentioned earlier, prevent any surprises and think of them as your advisors. So by sharing, you're also bouncing ideas with them that could better shape your proposal on the overall. And with all these dialogues and conversations, create a buzz. So it's the excitement that creates the anticipation and the support on your initiative as well. So while you're keeping everybody in the loop, be consistent with your updates. So we never like people going MIA on us, so let's not do that as well. Consistent updates also keep the hype up, and when you launch, you can launch with a bang eventually. And then we can also gather a diverse range of perspectives. So as I've mentioned earlier, getting different people involved not only is a good basis for ideas generation, you can also potentially seek out your ambassadors or change champion amongst them as well. And as Sasha mentioned earlier, take an agile approach. So it's important to just get started and adapt and realign along the way. Like 1.5 years ago, no one would have anticipated the pandemic and how it changed our ways of working. So over here, like flexibility and agility are the key. And then finally, also focus on team effort when you're presenting. So remember to give credit and appreciation to all the stakeholders involved. That way, people are also more willing to support and collaborate again. And with that, I'll hand it back to Sasha to share with us on the key metrics and measures.
Amazing. Thank you. That was really, really useful. Thank you, Jalen. So yeah, it's really important, as Jalen said, to involve the right stakeholders. And I think a lot of this comes down as well, almost to like a sales process, or at least, the sales process that we would follow and a lot of, vendors would follow, is you want to make sure that you've got champions in the process. So if you know you want to get buy-in or you need investment, you have to think about who are your champions, who are going to support you, who is going to help you drive that finance conversation, and be really strategic about who you invite and involve. It doesn't have to be everybody all at the same time. Sometimes I feel like that can be a bit overwhelming. You look at the previous slide that we put forward with those 4 groups of stakeholders, and you're probably thinking, well, how do we get everybody involved and everybody happy? It doesn't have to be everyone at the same time. It could be, touching base with your SMEs every couple of weeks, touching base with your sponsors kind of once a week, whatever works for you and whatever works for your time and the deadline as well, which is really key. So awesome, fantastic. I hope that was useful. So what are the key metrics and measures? So really, really important. And we get asked this all the time. How do we measure employee experience? How do we put, what kind of metrics could we include to back up our position on employee experience? So hopefully this should help. So first of all, where should we include metrics? And I've put little stars here against those 4 components that we've already gone over. So what's the problem? So you want to include metrics if you can, if you have that data, both quantitative and qualitative, in that problem statement framing. So that's really, really key. As with anything, if you have data to back up a point, people will be more likely to believe it, and it just kind of validates your position. Second, what is the cost? So again, maybe slightly harder, but including metrics here on what is the anticipated ROI, what are you expecting to see in terms of improvements in efficiency and productivity or net promoter score, whatever it is, include that here. And then lastly, how we'll solve it. So again, really important, just including metrics on these 3 sections will really just help to solidify your argument and your case for investment. So a couple of examples here, and the point that we always make with our clients is experience by nature is subjective. It is how we experience something. So trying to fit experience measurements into hard data and hard metrics is almost impossible. So it really has to be a blend of both. So normally when we work with our clients, we will build out a set of hard data metrics, so engagement scores, attrition scores, diversity metrics, eNPS, but we will complement that with the more subjective qualitative insights such as listening sessions, focus groups, and those kind of on the ground insights. And together you get a much richer data set when it comes to talking about how do you measure experience. But on the hard side, just a few ideas here. So engagement. So how has X issue impacted our engagement scores? What's the anticipated improvement? Productivity. How productive are we currently? And organizations measure productivity differently, so make sure you're investigating that. And what levels of productivity do we need to achieve this target? eNPS. How satisfied are our employees currently with the service we're providing them, and what improvements do we expect to see? Attrition. How high is attrition today? What's our target and why does it matter? Diversity, so again, really important, and definitely we've improved on this, is how diverse are we today? What are the targets we should have? What are the metrics associated with our diversity at a board level or at a senior management level? You know, these are all metrics that you can pull down. Efficiency is another one of those hard metrics. So how quickly are we serving our employees today? What is the average time for response? What is the average SLA resolution time? How are we escalating cases? You know, those are all metrics that would paint a very good picture of efficiency. What is the business impact? So how has experience impacted the P&L in this area of the business? And what is coming for that area of the business that we think we can anticipate a requirement for an increase in productivity or efficiency? And then lastly, as I mentioned before, that more subjective, that kind of qualitative richness of data is voice. So what have we done to listen to our employees, and how does that support the hard metrics that we have? And how does it maybe challenge some of those metrics that we have? So for example, we could say what we're seeing is we have a very diverse leadership team, but actually when we speak to our employees, they still have concerns around the legitimacy of the diversity investment here in this organization. How do we overcome those challenges? And I think you'll only get that by covering both bases. So overarching message here is when you're looking at metrics, yes, hard metrics are really important, but don't make sure you're not missing those kind of qualitative insights as well. They really add a layer of richness to your story. OKRs are another really, really powerful way of making sure that people know that your investment is focused. And OKRs, I think, and correct me if I'm wrong here, were made popular by a lot of tech startups. I think maybe Google pioneered this one. I'm not entirely sure. But OKRs are a really great way of kind of making sure that people know you're focused on results. So, for example, if the objective is to create a more seamless and efficient employee service experience within people and culture or within HR, what are the key results we're expecting to see in order to achieve that objective? So your objective is the overall objective of the business case, and you're detailing what the key results are. So this is something that you can look back on as well as a measure of your success to say, okay, we set out with a target of decreasing process handoffs, increasing the eNPS scores, decreasing the time to serve metrics. You know, these are all things that you can quantify very easily, and they support that overall objective. So it just seems a little bit more legit for people that are maybe a bit more numbers focused, or they want to make sure that we're seeing an ROI as quickly as possible. So a couple of tips just to finish off this section. Ensure the metrics you include are meaningful. Just because you can report on data doesn't make it relevant to your business case. So don't put metrics in that don't serve your case or don't tell a story. It just confuses people. Honestly, it does. Get comfortable with qualitative experience data. As I've said, you know, if we look at academic research, qualitative research is incredibly valid, and there are ways that you can code the insights that you gather so that you're really telling a solid story. And we do that a lot with our clients. We do focus groups and research sessions. We take all of those insights, which are either on post-it notes or interview data, and we code that so that we're coming up with a really solid set of these are the most popular responses to this question, or this is the biggest challenge based on all of the feedback we've received. don't get caught up in the perfect EX measurement. Honestly, I couldn't say this enough. I think people obsess over how do we, what is the gold standard for measuring experience? It doesn't have to be a gold standard. It just has to work for your organization. If you're confident that that measurement, that combination of measurements tells you something about the experience of your organization, go with it. It's really valuable. Work with the data you have. Don't stress too much if you don't have a very complex analytics platform. Just work with what you have got. I'm sure there are really, really key and important insights there. Ask for advice and guidance from other support functions. So if you know that your IT function have recently procured a fancy new IT solution, or your finance function, what metrics did they include in the business case? And what did they include in the business case? Did they develop a business case? Learn from other functions, reach out, get out there, ask people for guidance and see what they're using as their measure of success, and try to maybe mirror that as well, especially if their drivers were experienced as well. And know the business priorities. So, if you are pretty confident that mergers and acquisitions is a priority for organization, or increasing productivity, or increasing or improving the employer brand, make sure that you are sharing and including metrics that speak to those business priorities. Super important, and just makes it a lot easier for you to get that investment. Okay, we're almost at the end of our presentation. Presenting your business case. So just a couple of tips here on how to, you've developed it, you've poured your heart and soul into this, you're really confident with your metrics, you know what your problem statement is, you're ready to ask for millions of dollars, potentially not millions, whatever it is you're asking for. How do you present your business case as effectively as possible? So Jaylin, over to you.
Thanks. So as we have gone through everything you will need to know or prepare to build your business case, I think it's show time over here. So it's about what you want to present and how you want to present it to your stakeholders to convince them. So for first, we have our story. So make sure your business case has a really clear narrative. So what are your problem statements? Why is that a problem? And through this, also convince our stakeholders why they are in that room listening to your business case. And with that, we have our stakeholders. Have the right people in the room that can make decisions as well. Are the people present able to make decisions, or at least influence them? Are they the right people to be involved at the right time? And what else? So as Sasha mentioned earlier, talk about the opportunity cost of this investment. What else can be done with the same budget? Could the money or resource be better spent on another project or initiative? Rather than buying like off-the-shelf HRIS, could we also consider bespoke solutions as well? So what are the other areas that could possibly be spent on? Then we have our examples. So share industry best practices, understand what your competitors are doing. Are you on par, ahead, or even all behind them? And what do we need to know? What do we need to do to lead in that sphere? And then the ask, which is really, really important. So end your business case with a clear ask and the next step. What are you really expecting from people in the room? Is that a budget for implementation? Is it their endorsement? Be clear here so that you can really get your project moving. And then timing. So provide enough time for discussion and Q&A. Clarify any doubts or concerns, and this will actually help your stakeholders make a decision on the way forward as well. So let's take a look at an example, as Sasha mentioned earlier, on funding for a wellness platform for employees. So here we first stated the problem, the why. Firstly, to support the wellness of our employees working remotely. But why do we need to do this? Which brings about the second point. So we receive a lot of feedback from employees that this is a concern, and many of our employees are leaving due to stress. So we hear the concerns from the ground, and we think that we want to support the wellness, hence we are doing this. But let's take a deeper look at the why. So over here, we want to support our problem statement with the metrics as mentioned. So just naming a few metrics, we could include research data, employee feedback in terms of like how many people has provided such feedback and who they are and where they are from. It could be also reflected through engagement scores such as our pulse survey. And if people are leaving, our attrition data may be a helpful data over here as well, especially things that they have shared during their exit interview. And these are just some of the examples of metrics we could use to support our problem statement. And with that, we develop our solution. So we provide multiple options as well. In this case, like for example, option one, it could be a platform investment. Option two, to increase our benefit spend, or option three, a webinar series. So by providing many options, as Sasha mentioned earlier, we could also show our thought process throughout, and that we have also considered alternatives and even different options that could be considered. But despite providing different options, do still state your preferred one and why it is the preferred option. So in this case, option one, platform investment, is what we want to provide, and explain why. And after providing your option, state the ask. So by investing on a platform, I will need like 100K investment. I will need project sponsorship from the room, as well as change management resource. So state exactly what your ask is, so that you can get the results you intend to.
Fantastic. Great. So yeah, just an example to bring all of those points to life, and hopefully those practical tips on the presentation are really useful as well. I think just coming back to that slide as well before we move into a bit of a Q&A, as we've said before, I just really want to reiterate that when you're presenting or playing back your business case, you don't want anyone in the room that is unfamiliar with what you have been working on. Having those people in the room will likely derail the conversation. You're likely to get more resistance. You don't want anyone to be surprised. So have the right stakeholders in the room that, yes, can make key decisions, can maybe even champion the budget sign off. Maybe they're from procurement. You'll know who you need in that room to drive things forward. But just making sure that nobody is surprised about what's coming. It's been in the works for a while, and you have gone to them. As Jaylin said before, they're your advisors. You've sought counsel from them. You've allowed them to shape your business case, and so really, it's kind of a culmination of all of those conversations and that group work as well. I think as well, including those examples, really, really powerful. So, one of the things we see a lot, and we work with a number of technology vendors, is when organizations are building their proposal for tech vendors, including examples of people that are using that software, just gives people a little bit more confidence. And also, if you can get those really rich business cases that are sometimes published, but not all the time, on, what the ROI was or how fast they went live, those things really, really help as well. So just a few extra resources and tips here. So first of all, keep an eye on the Workflow blog. We have written a number of times, and will continue to write about why EX investment is important and tips on how to develop your business case strategy. So keep an eye on the blog. Make sure you're refreshing that, or if you're following us on LinkedIn, you'll see us posting those anyway. And as we work with clients, I'm sure our tips and insights will evolve. So we'll be sure to share those there. Check out our YouTube channel. So please subscribe to the Workflow YouTube channel. We've got our previous masterclass recordings, and the next masterclass, which we scheduled in a few weeks' time, will look at that EX research piece. So if you're kind of overwhelmed by all of the content today and you're thinking, oh, is my problem statement the right problem statement? Hopefully that next masterclass on how to do quite quick research will really, really help you. Next is Google Scholar. Again, like I said, you're not writing a thesis when you're doing your business case. You're not going to fit that into 8 slides, but if you can have a blend of industry and scientific research to back up your points, it will look fantastic. Trust me, no one is going to question you when you've got a really solid, highly referenced research paper backing up why this particular experience is important, or why a certain problem exists within your industry, for example. So definitely use Google Scholar. I don't think enough people use it. You can normally find PDF research papers, so you don't have to pay for them, although would encourage you to pay for them, because it's really important that we support researchers. And chat to us. So if you've got questions, or you think, look, Sasha, this is kind of our rough idea of a business case, just reach out. We'd be happy to have a conversation with you and share some insights on what we think would be the most effective way of you getting that investment you need. And as I said, we are here to support. If you decide actually it's much easier for us to outsource this business case, please feel free to engage with us. Like I say, we do this a lot. Outsource the hard work to us. We can do the research piece. We can gather those metrics and produce a really nice looking, solid business case. So let's look at the questions. So here we go. So we'll start with the first one. So if your business case is rejected, do you recommend requesting feedback? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely, without a doubt. It is so important that you ask what it was about the business case that was maybe lacking. You know, always ask for feedback, even if you get the green light. I think it's an important process to ask for feedback, and I think people really appreciate you asking for it either way. So yeah, absolutely. If you don't feel comfortable doing that in the meeting, because sometimes it can make it uncomfortable for others, just follow up with individual stakeholders directly. Maybe ask for a half an hour call, run through the deck with them again, and just say, how can I make this much stronger? And yeah, absolutely, I think that's really, really important. But if you involve the right stakeholders in that agile approach, you're probably less likely to get that rejection anyway, and you would have received feedback throughout the process. So don't just wait until the end for that feedback. Go out now. If you're drafting your business case now, go out for feedback. Okay, so specifically for APAC, where do you go for research data? A lot of resources on EX benchmarks out there are mostly US and EU based. Do you find Asian leaders respond well to research which is not localized? So I totally agree with you. This is a real challenge. You know, even doing some research papers last year, it was really, really hard for me to find localized data. I think we've got to work with what we've got and be honest about it as well. So if you include US or EU based research, being upfront about it in that business case and saying, look, there are some limitations to the research that we've referenced because it's not specific to this region. And because of that, we think we need to factor in X, Y, Z consideration. So I think go ahead, use the data that you have available. If you can find it that's specific to the region, that's fantastic. But if not, I would add that extra layer of explanation so that people know you're not just taking US research and thinking it applies perfectly to this region. So hopefully that is useful. And we've got another question which has come through. So how would you propose we conduct research without extending the timeline of the business case? Zaylin, do you want to share any initial thoughts on this?
Sure. I think we all know the importance of conducting the research, and it doesn't have to be exhaustive or like 10 pages paper and things like that. It could be a very simple one and a concise one. Know what information you want to include. It could be like what your competitors are doing, for really draw out where your focuses are and what could really push people over the line in terms of convincing your stakeholders, and just concentrate on those few. And with that, you won't really take up too much of your time to do the business case.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't think it has to be a laborious process. You could be quite creative with how you do that research. You know, typically for us, that looks like research focus groups and surveys, depending again on how much time you have. But it really takes less than a few days to set up a listening session to validate some of the data points that you have, or to really kind of crisp up what your problem statement is. It doesn't have to be laborious at all. So last question, we've still got a couple of minutes. So let me just have a look here. We have to win over the CEO to fully support any EX project, otherwise it will fail. Would you agree with that? And there's some other explanation there about why employee experience and customer experience is so important, and the two are linked. I totally agree. I think we have to make sure that senior stakeholders are bought into employee experience. I think it's absolutely vital, and I think over the last 12, 18 months, we've really seen EX come to the forefront of a lot of strategic agendas, and that conversation around how CX and EX is linked has just become more frequent and so much richer. I do think it's important to have the CEO fully supported, but I also think there is a lot of power in action, and results speak for employee experience. So I don't think we have to necessarily wait for the CEO to be fully behind the message for us to do something. And I also don't think that doing something with employee experience or improving employee experience has to be a huge overhaul or a massive investment. Small incremental changes and projects that really drive improvements with employee experience over time will be enough to build a business case for future investment. So I think it is so important to try and win over the CEO, but I don't think we should let that hold us back as EX practitioners or HR leaders in doing something. Often the results lead the way and speak for us. So hopefully that answers your question. The last question that we've had come through, just one more minute, is how do you present this? So I touched on this very briefly, but I always think PowerPoint is the easiest way of us doing this. Make sure you include an executive summary because a lot of people don't have time. So exec summary to begin with, and then, as I say, maximum 8 slides will really get your message across, and then everything else, put it in the appendix. It's up to you if you'd like to do some interpretive dance. I think that could also be a fantastic way of communicating the value of your project. I'm joking, please don't do that, but if you do, let us know. That would be hilarious for us. But no, just a very simple PowerPoint presentation, and you'll probably be doing it virtually as well. So really think about how you present virtually, how you get people engaged, how you get people excited. Maybe we can do a separate conversation on how to present EX investment business cases, because I do think that's also an important part as well as your PowerPoint presentation. So that marks the end of our masterclass. We are at the 45 minutes. Thank you all so much. I appreciate there was a lot of information there, but I really hope this has been useful. We're getting into that kind of sales mindset of getting people on board and getting the investment we need. Any questions, please just reach out. Would love to chat to you about what you're asking for and where we might be able to help you with your business case. And look out for the invite for the next masterclass, which is on employee experience research practice. So with that, thank you all so much for joining. Have a great week, and we look forward to speaking with you soon.
Thank you.